If your gut's gotten more unpredictable with age and you've been told it's just in your head or that you should simply cut more foods out, this video is for you. Because the truth is, the causes of digestive issues after 50 are often hidden. They're overlooked by doctors. They're misunderstood by friends and family and buried under years of self-blame or confusion. And we're not just talking about food triggers. We're going deeper. We'll unpack how the medical system gaslights older adults and traps them in a cycle of dismissal and misdiagnosis. How hormonal shifts can completely change gut function, and why symptoms that show up as we grow older are rarely just about what's on your plate. My name is Joe Leach, a qualified dietitian and founder of Diet vs. Disease, the world's largest online gut health clinic. I've been teaching about gut health and low FODMAP diet, SIBO, and all the rest since 2016 right here on this YouTube channel. And our team has helped thousands of people around the world with digestive disorders, especially those 50 years and older, to get to the real root of their symptoms and finally feel in control again. Now, in this video, you'll hear from two of our senior gut health dietitians, Tim and Kirsten, as we unpack the hidden reasons your gut changes with age and why so many people suffer in silence for such a long time. I remember the very first time I ever saw a white hair on my head. We just arrived in Hawaii and checked into the hotel. There was a full-length mirror outside the bathroom and the window was on the side, and it must have shone light in a way I'd never seen, but I could see this standout white hair and I was like, what is that? I was able to pull it out. Now these days, I've got white hairs in my beard, on the sides. I mean, there's no hiding those anymore. That's aging, right? My point is this: just like the pigment cells stop producing color in your hair, that's why they turn gray or white, the cells, the nerves and muscles in your gut age as well as you get older. They don't regenerate or function quite like they used to. We get increases in sensitivity. It becomes less resilient there in the gut. And that's something that none of us can change. However, what we can change, and what this video is really about, are the other hidden factors that most people don't realize are just as important. Things like chronic stress, unprocessed emotions, hormonal shifts that throw off your entire system, even how the medical system talks to you or labels you can keep you stuck. That's what we're unpacking today, because these are the things that often matter more than food, yet no one is talking about them. So I'm glad you found us here today, because what Tim shares in this short clip is something we see all the time. It's what often happens when someone finally does go to the doctor for their gut issues.
So there's lots of reasons why people might not be detected by the medical system for their IBS. We also have to remember that IBS is a diagnosis of exclusion. Some people don't go and get their issues diagnosed. A lot of doctors also aren't really interested in biological causes, which they aren't really experts in. And so once someone comes along with unknown digestive issues, if they do get diagnosed with IBS, that used to be, a syndrome of, we don't know what's wrong with you, so now go away. A lot of people won't follow up after that.
You can hear it in how Tim explains the gap in care, right? When someone's told, we don't know what's wrong, must be IBS, and then brushed off, that's a diagnosis of exclusion. And it's not just frustrating, it's damaging, and it's more common if you are an older patient. And that kind of dismissal becomes internalized, which brings us to a critical concept that Kirsten, a dietitian and mindset coach on our team, is going to cover in the next clip. And it's called medical hexing. And it goes beyond being dismissed by your doctor. It's what happens when that dismissal becomes a label, and then that label becomes part of your identity. Suddenly it's not, I have digestive symptoms. It's, I am an IBS patient. And that subtle shift can keep people stuck for years. And it's a big reason why gut issues in older adults often feel worse, harder to manage, and harder to shake.
When you go to a medical provider to get information about what's going on with you, and they sort of disregard you and give you this scary kind of label, and then you identify with it, and then your psyche identifies with it. So you don't remove yourself from the condition. It's not like I have a body that suffers from IBS. It's I am an IBS patient, right? So it creates this whole psychological sequelae, like this cascade, and people sometimes exacerbates their symptoms, especially when it's disregarded. But, you know, IBS and IBD and celiac disease were all lumped under IBD around the turn of the 20th century, right? And so there's this famous doctor, I want to say his name's Valentine Haas, who treated and cured so many people with a basically low FODMAP, very specific carbohydrate, grain-free type of diet, but it was very low FODMAP. And the only starchy thing he allowed was green banana flour. So he was hugely celebrated until like, what was it, like the 20s or 30s when someone actually identified gluten. And then we started getting this differentiation of GI illnesses. So like before that, it was like tropical sprue or celiac, like everything was considered celiac. Sorry, not IBD. It was all called celiac. And then it started becoming Crohn's and ulcerative and IBS and diverticulitis or diverticulosis. And all of those are still thought to be initiated by dysbiosis, and whatever the input is that creates the dysbiosis for you. It's like, you know, take whatever hand of poker you're given in life. You really never know what you'll present. But it's an interesting history. So I too meet people, especially in their 80s, who say, I don't know how long I've had this, but when I was 9, someone told me I had a spastic colon. And I'm like, okay, so you've had this since you were 9. And they're like, oh, I guess. But it does evolve, right? And so I think a lot of older people, especially if we're talking about elderly, they're trying to differentiate between what is serious and what's not, because they know they only have this much time, 7 minutes, 15 minutes to get their most pressing medical need taken care of. And they put their GI, they put their stress on the back burner, and they're like, you know what, I'm having arrhythmias. Like, let's focus on my heart palpitation. So globally in the elderly population, prevalence is estimated at 10 to 20% of IBS. And with women having 4 times more than men in the elderly population. And it really starts at menopause. So like 40 to 50 and above, women, like they just outrank men with the condition. So I think part of it is the medical system, right? And a lot of our research comes from wealthy Western countries. So we're also not getting the picture of what happens in South America, what happens in Africa, what happens in Asia. So I think we should keep that in mind. It's pretty prevalent. Many people have these issues, even if it comes and goes, like post-infectious, then they go into remission, thank God, right? Like they never have it again. But with many people, it's chronic and it'll just kind of vacillate in severity.
It's fascinating what Kirsten said, because once you're told you just have IBS and there's nothing else to do really, that label sticks. You start to believe the condition is you. And the worst part is it stops you from looking further. It stops you from finding opportunities to remedy the issue. If you're thinking, oh, this is me, I need help with this, be sure to tap the first link in the description or comment Sure Pathway to learn more about our program and the For Sure pathway that makes it so successful. And if you're just starting out and want to focus on diet, grab our free FODMAP food list, which will be linked to in the description. Now, I had to ask Kirsten about the green banana powder and the American doctor who was utilizing it, so many years ago, who, for the record, his name was Dr. Sidney Valentine Haas.
Yeah, in fact, he prescribed it to all. They would go get it from him. You can still see in the SCD community, there's still green banana flowers. It's very expensive now. I think part of that has to do with the crop. It's like coffee and cocoa, bananas, equatorial crops are suffering. So it's not cheap anymore, but it used to be. Even when I started practicing 17 years ago, it was super cheap. Now it's not. And I have that guy's original work. I couldn't get it on microfinch, so I bought a book that's Xerox copies of his studies. And he was very celebrated, globally, until someone identified gluten. And then everyone ignored what he did, even though it still created so much remission for people. And they just went all about focusing, you know what the saying is, we used to be holistic, then we became reductionist, and now we're trying to make our way back to a holistic approach in science. He was caught in that very reductionist, germ theory, penicillin, everything kind of hit around the same time, right? So, but he's a fascinating guy.
It's wild to think Dr. Haas was using green banana flour a century ago to treat gut symptoms, and it worked. But it got ignored because it didn't fit the mainstream narrative. And that kind of reductionist thinking still exists today and can make it challenging for gut health patients, and even more so when you're an older patient. Now, there's another hidden piece of the puzzle that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and that's hormones. Especially for women, the hormonal shifts that come as you grow older can really act like a wrecking ball on your gut. Estrogen, insulin, and stress hormones all interact with the digestive system. They influence how fast things move, how sensitive the gut lining is, and even how the microbiome functions. It's one of the big reasons symptoms often feel like they come out of nowhere in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. Kirsten unpacks this for us.
That's a big packet to unpack, because so if we're talking about sex hormones, like sex steroid hormones, there's definitely a correlation with female hormones and GI changes. And this happens like in menses, right? So it's quite common for I did pediatrics, right? And I would hear this same story, like every month I get my period, I get diarrhea for like a day and then it goes away. And we're like, that's normal. Don't worry about it, right? Because there's this relationship with estrogen and insulin, GI motility, etc. So that's very tightly connected. And when you have really big shifts, like pregnancy, like you get a hysterectomy, like you go through menopause, it just like this big wave, like someone, dumping a huge rock in your calm little serene pool. And then you deal with the after effects of it. And then it'll settle down as the hormones are regulated. And there's this really interesting documentary that just came out on menopause care in the Western globe and how bad it's been. So it speaks to some of that. I would encourage people to watch it. It was on PBS. So there is like a relationship between sex, steroids, and GI motility. And this happens in men too. It's just they don't pay as much attention to their fluctuations because they don't bleed every month, so it's not as big a deal. They just chalk it up to something else. But then if we're talking about stress hormones, that totally leads us into mindset and the fact that we have this very integrated nervous system, right? We have these reptilian brains and then these primate brains, and then we have these like human only, very high functioning prefrontal cortex, but it's all integrated. And it originally was peripherally, like all along your spinal cord, all in your hands, your legs, your gut, one of the biggest sensory organs, right? So when you live with chronic low-grade stress, that leads to chronic low-grade nervous system dysregulation. And we know what happens in fight or flight, right? So whether you realize you're in fight or flight or not, if you're someone that tells me I run around all day, I don't have time for myself, I know what's happening with your nervous system. Like it's really unlikely you're in rest and digest, like a safe, healthy state. You're probably in fight or flight, and fight or flight turns off the GI tract. So there's all these like varieties of how hormones interact with motility. We know there's a change in, the microbiome. It's like if it senses danger, it shifts to deal with danger.
This is one of those things that mainstream medicine barely touches. And yet, for many of our clients, understanding this connection is just a huge light bulb moment for them. And that's part of what makes this so tricky, right? Hormonal shifts aren't always dramatic, but their effects are. Think of hormones like a thermostat in your house. You might not think about it often, but if it's off by just a few degrees, you feel it everywhere. So if it's too hot or too cold, your whole system struggles to stay comfortable. And this is the same with hormonal shifts. For your gut, it means like more sensitivity, more bloating, irregularity, even if your diet hasn't changed. But that's just one part of the picture. Hormones and stress are deeply intertwined, and together they can reshape how your gut functions in ways that most people never realize, especially if you've lived a long life with a lot of stress. Which brings us to the next layer, the role of chronic stress on digestion, how your body reacts when it's constantly in survival mode, which we often call fight or flight. Now, just as a reminder, when your nervous system is in this fight or flight mode, your body diverts blood away from your gut and main organs out to your limbs so that you can run or so you can fight. That's why when you're in a state of chronic stress, digestion really slows or shuts down completely. But there's another state of chronic stress we can find ourselves in that impacts the gut, and it's called freeze or faint. And it reduces libido, blood flow to the gut, even our intelligence as well. So we're more likely to make like poor decisions and seek foods that are not in line with our health goals and have less willpower. So Kirsten explains this phenomenon in more detail and how it relates.
It's just one thing. So when you're in, that's the parasympathetic autonomous nervous system. So that's fight or flight. So there's also like contracture, like freeze or faint. So everything is tense and not doing what it's supposed to. So your intelligence goes down, your creativity, your libido, your immunity goes down, and your GI blood flow goes down. So yeah, you don't make good decisions. So food-seeking behaviors change, and you tend to seek foods that are more of a burden to the GI tract, right? So you're in a stressed out state, and then what we have accessible to us, like high fat, high sugar, the amount, like the quantity of nutrients we put into our systems now has never been seen except for the last 100 years. And I think people struggle with that because they'll see people running to Starbucks and doing everything they need to do to deal with the modern way we live. And they seem fine. And I'm always like, they're not fine. Eventually it catches up to you, right? But they're like, why can't my body do that? And the point is, no one's body can do that for long. Right? So like it's stressed out, already not working, then it's getting burdened with like a massive quantity typically of calories and sugar and fat, and it shuts down so it can't do its job. And then so you got to find ways to shift into parasympathetic where your libido comes back and your creativity and your digestion and your immunity. And that's, what all of our mindset coaches do with our clients. So there's a really big correlation, and people don't pick up on that low grade, that everyday stress, which adds up. Like they literally collapse at night, and then they wake up and drink coffee and go all day without kind of thinking like, oh, actually, this is really new to our systems. No wonder my body can't keep up with this.
Now, this sort of spiral that so many of us find ourselves in, it's also compounded further by the fact that we don't realize we're in it, or we do realize, but we're still content to stay there because it's safe and convenient. And then some people are just in a complete state of denial. But I mean, so many people, especially older folks, are stuck in lives or relationships that feel safe on the surface, but aren't safe for their gut. And Tim speaks to this in more detail.
It's definitely a tough one. A lot of our older adults feel stuck in their digestive issues and their situations because it's what they've known for so long, right? And I see, especially in talking to our mindset coaches, a lot of older adults who might be in their 70s and 80s who really aren't happy in the situation they're living in. They're truly not happy with their partner of 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years, but they feel truly stuck to do anything about it in the stage of life they're in. And creating that change is a big step for a lot of them. Someone choosing to leave a partner, someone choosing to move states, someone choosing to end the career that's still supporting them at the age of 60, 65 plus, they are sort of safe in those situations, even though those situations are not safe for them and their gut. And, we need a mindset coach here really to talk to this. But I think some of the biggest change we see in people on our program is those who do step into the unknown. They do take that big leap and they see that sort of global change in how they feel from being brave and making that change. So yeah, it's definitely a tough one, getting stuck in your own nervous system because it's what you know, rather than sort of trying to push out against it.
It's funny how your gut could be screaming at you, but if the rest of your life looks calm on the outside, it's easy to sort of brush it off. And that disconnect is something we see all the time with our clients. And if you're starting to realize that maybe your stress, your routine, or even your mindset is playing a bigger role than you thought, now's the time to explore what support could look like. You can tap the first link in the description or comment Sure Pathway to learn about our signature for Sure Pathway. It's the framework we use to help people over 50 finally resolve their gut issues. Or if you're just at the beginning and want to start simple, grab our free FODMAP food list. That's link number 2 in the description. So everything we've covered in this video, from being dismissed by doctors to medical hexing to stress and hormonal shifts, it's all been about the deeper, lesser known drivers of gut issues as you age. I wanted to focus on the things that aren't being talked about, right? The hidden factors that often matter more than what we're eating. So if you enjoy this type of content and conversation, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so we know to do more of it. Now in this next clip, the final clip, we're tying it all together because it's not only about stress or hormones, right? It's about how we respond to life as we get older and our communities get smaller. Kirsten explains why flexibility, so emotional and psychological flexibility, becomes one of the most important ingredients for gut health and our overall well-being.
Like, what is the statistics on your chance of dying the year you have major life events? Retirement, divorce is very significant. Like it's through the roof. So big life events are scary, and people know that. As your community gets smaller as you age, you're getting rid of a lifeline. There's this really interesting Taoist quote about that, and I know I'm going to butcher it, but there's this quote in Taoism about you need to become like the willow. You don't want to get stiff and break in the wind, right? That with aging, you need to actually learn to be more flexible because a lot of things are out of your control. But, in our societies, there's not a lot to lean on, right? So if your spouse is the only other person you have, even if it doesn't work good, you just think, well, I'll just do this while I can. There's like a lot of societal and cultural and familial constructs that keep them there, but it's also very scary. And I think that's why mindset works. Like, so when we study like etiology of IBS, and it's the same thing with anything, like obesity is a good example. There are physical manifestations, and then there are psychological processes that can keep you stuck in that state or help you achieve remission. It's really both things. And I think just the way our society works is we kind of like to chalk it up to it's all physical. All you need to do is go to the doctor and fix it. So they might not see that relationship that like actually until a therapist tells them like maybe a change of job is good. Maybe it's time for a divorce. Like maybe you need to cut your, borderline personality adult kid that's still relying on you out of the equation. I don't think everyone makes that relationship, but it is always both. And it's always going, with the exception of acute infection and motor vehicle accidents, everything else in healthcare requires both. There's a physical cause and a psychological state that goes along with it. So, but yeah, not everyone knows that. Like I've met many people that come in and in questioning, like if we get a social history, which they're not used to even providing their personal details, they'll divulge this stuff and then they will start putting the connections. They're like, actually, my gut's fine. And then every time I see this person in my family, it's not, and I'm like, have you talked to mindset about this? Like, let's start working on that because there's only so much I can do with the food part, right?
This is why we focus so much on mindset and nervous system work inside our program, because without that, even the perfect diet or supplement won't fix the root of the issue, especially in people who are older and have had issues a large part of their life. Now, just in case you're wondering, like, well, this channel is called Diet Burst Disease and they treat gut issues and we didn't talk about food at all. That's the point, right? For so many people, especially over the age of 50, symptoms aren't just caused by food. You have to go deeper. We work on the nervous system. We rebuild confidence around food. We stop the cycle of fear and confusion that's been like running the show for so many years. And if this video resonated with you, if we were speaking to you, then you know it's time to do something different. Tap the first link in the description or comment Sure Pathway to learn more about our signature program and the For Sure pathway that makes it so successful. But if you're just starting out and you just want to focus on diet, then at least grab our free FODMAP food list, which is the second link in the description. And finally, if you want to learn about SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and if that in fact could be the cause of your IBS, watch this next video.